Welcome back to Vital Signs. If you're just tuning in, you're going to want to go to nowmedia.tv, click on shows, and catch the first half of today's episode. It was epic, and we're going to switch gears. It's time to tackle two of the biggest challenges we all face: mental overwhelm and mental trauma. Whether it's stress from work, family, or just the demands of everyday life, learning to manage our mental load is essential to overall health and well-being. I'm really excited because now we have joining us Dr. Andy Lee, a holistic family doctor with over 26 years of experience. He's treated over 50,000 patients. His passion, helping people overcome mental overwhelm and trauma without medication or counseling. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for the opportunity for being here. It's such a pleasure to come all the way to Houston to see you and see you in person.
I'm really excited about this. You have a new book coming out, but before we dive into all of those details, what the heck is mental overwhelm?
Mental overwhelm is a massive, massive problem. In the US alone, over 74% of people either have stress or mental overwhelm. It's a massive, massive problem. And it's easy to see why that is. I mean, we've got such fast-paced lifestyles these days. You know, we've got so much available to us that we never had decades ago. And it's just causing so much, confusion and distress for people. And it begins where, I suppose we can divide it into different parts, where, for instance, in work, where we have computers, where originally, when they came out, it was supposed to help us with our work and make our lives easier, but we really found out that they did make our lives easier, but they actually make us process more work, to process more volume. And then by processing that greater volume, it actually means that we're doing more work. And so it's not making it easier. It is in one sense, but we're actually doing more work. So if anything, we're doing more work.
It's a mental fatigue as opposed to more of a physical fatigue.
It is. It's a mental fatigue, and that carries on with things in our day-to-day life. You know, we have these phones, and we have access to so much things. So, for example, there's so much content available on things like YouTube. You know, an interesting fact about YouTube. There's 500 hours of content uploaded on YouTube every single minute. It's just crazy.
That is crazy.
You know, and then there's Netflix as well. And on Netflix, there's 36,000 hours of content available as well. And if you wanted to watch everything on Netflix, it'll take you over 4 hours and 2 months, back to back, without any breaks, to watch everything on Netflix.
Wow. Well, it's information overload is what it is.
It is.
And so now that we know that we have information overload and we've got this mental overwhelm because we're processing more, not just at work, but also at home and everything in between, how do we manage this?
Yeah, well, it's difficult, Jen. You know, so most people's lives, I mean, I use the analogy of a giant washing machine where people have this giant washing machine, and in there is everything in life thrown in. And so the analogy is like, they've got all their whites, they've got all their colors, they've got all their bedding, they've got everything thrown in, and that represents life. So you've got every aspect of your life in this giant washing machine. But then what happens is it's running around, it's not organized, and people are being reactive. So the analogy is that when they open the door for their washing machine and then the thing falls out, that's what they're dealing with day to day in life. But then sometimes when they open the door, more than one thing falls out. So they find themselves really having difficulty at managing their life. And it's so crazy really that they're just struggling. And then what happens as well is people, when they're so overwhelmed, they find themselves going down rabbit holes. So what happens is when they have one problem, it reminds them of another problem, and that reminds them of another problem, and that reminds them of another problem, and before they know it, they're over here working on this problem, when they really should be over here doing this problem originally. Then they go, oh, shall I be doing this problem, or shall I be doing this problem? And then they get undecided, and then they get anxious, worrying about, should they be doing this problem, or should they be dealing with this task? And then with that anxiety, it becomes even harder to then make a decision. And so they're getting overwhelmed, so it makes it harder to then decide what to do. and then they're getting overwhelmed, and then it's even harder to start to do it. And then what happens is invariably is they then can't decide what to do. They don't do anything. Then they get distracted with the phone. A message comes up, and they go, okay, oh, a message, I'll deal with that.
Shut down.
And then they deal with the message, and they get distracted. Oh, I'm on my phone. I'll see what's happening on, Facebook or social media. And then before they know it, they're scrolling for hours, and before they know it, they've lost hours of the day. And then they feel so guilty about that.
Oh, it's like a snowball effect, and it's just like, I'm anxious just hearing you talk about it. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, oh goodness. Okay, so full disclosure. Everything every distraction is cut off for me when I'm in my day. There is no, I'm on do not disturb mode. I do one thing. I don't care if you call me. I don't care if the house is burning down. I'm focused. And so when I hear about this, my ADD and everything is making me anxious. So talk to me about what people can do, because I know everyone out there is feeling this viscerally. They're like, you're explaining my life, and maybe I just shut down because I just can't handle all the decisions, and we have to make so many of them. So you've helped thousands of people through this. What is the first step to regaining control over this overwhelm? What is the first step to get out of this circumstance that people at home can maybe start to work on?
Sure. So there's a story behind that, Jen. So it's about my own journey. So I went through this exact same journey as you did, as a lot of people did, and I was overwhelmed. And this happened to me over 10 years ago. And this is where I said to myself, when my life was so overwhelming, I couldn't decide what to do. I was saying yes to everything. I was dopamine chasing, didn't realize it at the time. And I had so many tasks on the go. I was just so overwhelmed myself, to the point where I was making myself, mentally sick. And so this is where I said to myself, because medicine was a superpower for me, I've got all these qualifications after my name, as we talked about before. And so I said to myself, Chancellor, look, you're a doctor. You're a smart doctor. You apparently got all these letters after your name. Figure it out.
Yes.
And that's what I did. So I said to myself, look, pretend I was a patient and it came with this problem. What would I do? And this is where I came up with my own formula to help me. It was a simple, easy to follow formula, which I was using for myself to help myself sort myself out. And then I just kept it to myself. So I use it all the time myself, not realizing it could be it could be used by other people. So over the last 6 years, and particularly the last 3 years, I started sharing this with more and more of my patients, because I saw people like myself who were overwhelmed, whether they had ADHD or not, who were struggling with life. And I said, okay, I've got this thing that I created about 10 years ago. Would you mind me sharing it with you? And some of the patients, yeah, why not? Give it a go. So I shared it with them. And then they have to implement the process. It takes about 2 or 3 days to implement the process, but if they do, then they tell me, wow, it's a life changer, it's a game changer. And this is where I got encouraged to share it more and more. And so over the last 2 or 3 years particularly, I've been sharing it a lot more and being helping a lot more people. And it's a really simple process. So it's a mind mapping process. And essentially what it involves is, first of all, we have to empty our brains, because our brains are full and they're just full of stuff. And we, as I said before, we go down these rabbit holes and we think of one thing, we think of these other things. And so it's very distracting. And so we find that we don't have very much time for ourselves to think and to make the right decisions. So we sometimes rush our decisions. And we sometimes then not make the right decisions for ourselves, and we have regrets about some of the decisions that we make. So essentially, the first process that I tell people is about emptying their mind, is clearing the space of their mind, so that there is nothing there in your head where you have to remember.
Okay, well, I'm going to interrupt you right here because I've got, 156 browsers open in my mind right now. And I'm like, when I try to clear my mind, thoughts just keep coming. What then?
Yeah, but this is where this is part of the process. So I get people, and this is part in my book, in the first part, where it's called a mind dump. You dump every single thing that's in your head onto paper. And then once you've done that, you then organize it in a particular way, following my formula. And it does so in a logical, step-by-step, easy to follow process. And by doing so, it put things in separate different compartments, and then it becomes much easier to then organize your life, because we love to compartmentalize everything. Because if we do that, it makes life much easier to organize.
Yes. So you're basically brain dumping everything. Listen, folks, step number 1. You are here listening to the expert in this space. If you are in mental overwhelm, if you just can't make one more decision and you can't figure out where to start, brain dump. Grab a piece of paper, write every thought in your brain, because once it's on paper, something magical happens and our brain feels like we don't need to hold on to it anymore, and it allows us to kind of close the open browsers in our brain. So today, that is your first action step. We do have to take a brief break, but we'll be right back after these messages.